Welcome back to The Price of Business. This is William Edmunson, and for Kevin. We're going to get right on to Chris Kidd, President and CEO of Chris Kidd Enterprises. Chris is a fixture on the show here, and he's got some interesting things we're going to talk about today, and he's got a guest that we'll have on the show as well. Chris, welcome as always.
Thanks. Good to be here again this morning.
Glad to have you. Well, you've got some interesting stuff that's very timely for people who follow sports at all. Why don't you walk us through that?
Well, yeah, we're doing a little series on the whole concussion issue that's going on and the legal aspects and stuff of every within the sports, because it's actually expanded further than the NFL. It's even within the NCAA and everything. So,
right.
I've got a really great guest to talk about that this morning. We've got Glen Rothstein. He's a entertainment and sports law partner over at Greenberg, Glusker Fields, Clayman, and Mochtinger in L.A., California. I know that's a mouthful, but
you got it out though.
Yeah. So I don't want to take up too much of his time since we have a short segment here, but good to have you on, Glen. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I don't know if I'm a fortunate son, but I liked your intro music. So nice to wake up to that out here in Los Angeles.
Well, give us a quick little overview about like what you do with your firm.
I'm a partner at Greenberg, Glusker Fields, Clayman, and Mochtinger in Los Angeles, California. I specialize in entertainment and sports litigation, and that involves not only going to trial but also litigation avoidance and trying to forestall problems before they blow up. But if they do, I'm kind of the guy they call out of the bullpen to fix it. So.
And you worked on some pretty famous cases as well. The one that we were talking about just the other day, the Clippers deal, you handled that as well, right?
Nah, I can't take credit for that. That was Pierce O'Donnell and Bert Fields and Bob Baradaran, but the firm certainly did a bang-up job on that case, and that's kind of the field we play in.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about this whole concussion deal that's going on within the NFL and this the settlement. And before we get to any of the NCAA stuff, can you give us a little bit of like some history on that and what's going on?
Yeah, sure. The district court back in April of last year affirmed a massive uncapped settlement that could be as much as $1 billion for players that have suffered from certain traumatic injuries, during their playing careers. The case went up on appeal to the Third Circuit. The Third Circuit affirmed the settlement overwhelmingly, and now a certain number of players have asked for something called an en banc review, claiming that it's not broad enough to cover all the injuries. Basically, the plaintiffs feel there's a conflict between players that are injured now and those that will manifest injuries in the future, and they want to send it back to the district court to make sure there's some form of compensation for mild injuries associated particularly with CTE. And very interestingly, the Third Circuit three-judge panel was very nervous about the fact that if you were to send it all back and make the settlement broader, it would water down the settlement fund. I think the quote was for every field goal kicker who feels depressed. And they felt that would harm the greater good. Essentially, the Third Circuit said that the settlement is not perfect, but it's fair. And in the long run, they recognized that only about 5,000 of the 20,000 players actually filed lawsuits claiming real injuries. The appealing players had an opportunity not to be part of the class action, and only 200 players, opted out when you compare it to over 2,000 players who opted out of the NFL publicity rights class action. So where things stand now is the Third Circuit is waiting to hear this en banc, which means the full panel. Theoretically, if the Third Circuit affirms, the players could appeal to the United States Supreme Court, and the NFL is trying to cry, well, the longer you appeal, the longer it is that we can get the money to the players that need it. But really, to a certain degree, I think this is kind of the NFL's same old song and dance. They're saying the studies are inconclusive on the long-term effects of CTE. It can only be fully diagnosed post-mortem. The NFL executives that, were on Capitol Hill, Jeff Miller, and said there's a link between CTE and football. Those comments were taken out of context, and so on and so forth. Because the way things stand now, under this current settlement, a former player with things like Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease can receive as much as $3.5 million. Lou Gehrig's disease can receive as much as $5 million. But under the deal terms, the estates of former players who already have died of CT will receive $4 million. But the estates of those who die of the condition after the approval of the settlement and have no other qualifying conditions will receive nothing. And that really was the fight. It's how do you know if you have it, if it can only be diagnosed after you're dead, and if there's a cutoff on the settlement terms, it's going to leave a big segment of the injured football player population without recompense.
Wow. Yeah, post-mortem's a little bit late for any kind of effect there.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell us what some of the cutting-edge cases are out there?
Well, I mean, one case right now that is very interesting is the Scroggins lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And this was filed at the end of March. And this came out right after Jeff Miller's comments about the linkage between CTE and football, as well as the New York Times report that 100 cases of CTE were not part of the report when the players were opting into the settlement. So he filed a complaint claiming that essentially he was defrauded into the settlement because he didn't have full knowledge, and added a RICO claim, a civil RICO claim, for being fraudulently misled and having failed to receive all pertinent information. That is at the pleading stage now. And if the NFL is obviously saying, well, you opted in and you don't have standing to bring the case because you accepted the settlement. But if the court finds that this was hidden information, this could, start a veritable tsunami of new litigation where plaintiffs may start opting out of the settlement.
That opens up
and move forward, but that remains to be seen. What was compelling was that the Third Circuit apparently did not seem to find any of that information relevant when their three-panel of judges affirmed the global settlement.
That actually opens up a whole other Pandora's box as far as the NFL hiding stuff and some of the cases that have gone on, not even pertaining to concussions, but like the Ray Rice incident and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people already don't trust stuff that's going on there and the commissioner and everything. But I know we're getting real close. We're going to have to wrap it up. But real quick, Glenn, tell me a little bit about the NCAA thing that's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, the concussion issue has gone all the way down to the NCAA level, and there was a $75 million concussion settlement involving the NCAA, and they're looking to revisit that as well. They want to put $70 million into a medical monitoring fund to screen current and former student athletes for signs of concussions and other trauma, including CTE, and like $5 million will go towards a concussion-related research. But really, kind of the players, student-athletes position there is this is good because it's going to help future student-athletes, but it really doesn't do much for the injuries of the past. And a little wrinkle that they've put in is that if you're a two-sport player like Bo Jackson or somebody like that, you can only sue for your injuries caused by one sport. So they're trying to water it down a little bit. I mean, just like anything else, in my opinion, it all comes down to money and image.
Absolutely.
For the most part, I mean, I think the league does have good intentions. I don't think they want their players dying. I think they do want to protect them.
Sure.
But I think there's been a sea change from the 60s and 70s where these guys were just commodities to now they're investments.
Glenn, thank you. We've got to wrap it up here. You're listening to The Price of Business. Thank you, Chris Kidd. Thank you, Glen Rothstein.
Pleasure being here. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. We'll be back tomorrow with more of The Price of Business.